the dark feminine or the dark goddess is many things. I'm going to call it she because nature has genders, energy has genders, there are binaries, there are polarities, there are splits, and there is unity. So I'm going to call the dark goddess or the dark feminine she. And she has many realms. She has the realm of actual goddesses that we know about, and some examples of the goddesses that are like the dark goddess. I'm going to throw out two really basic ones. Kali, who is the goddess of death, destruction, and rebirth. If you guys have studied goddesses at all, you've very likely heard of Kali. She is death, she is destruction, and then she's the rebirth of the whole cycle. So it's that Kali symbolizes the end of one cycle and the start of a new cycle. And the second dark goddess archetype, I'm giving you guys archetypes so you have an energy to hold on to as we go. Although there's many more than two dark goddesses, I just want to put two out there today so you get or can feel like the energy of this. The second dark goddess that I wanted to bring into this dialogue is Lilith. And many, many, many fewer people know about Lilith. In the Garden of Eden, before there was Adam and Eve, there was a goddess named Lilith. And Lilith was Adam's first wife. Eve was not the first wife. And Lilith would not have, hey Rod, Lilith would not have missionary style sex with Adam. Lilith had to be on top during sex. And because Lilith, hey David, because Lilith had to be on top during sex, she got kicked out of the Garden of Eden and labeled a demoness. And she wasn't. She was a bold woman. She was a brazen woman. But for the Judeo-Christian patriarchal system at that time, and in the time we still live in, Lilith symbolized sexuality and sin. And that whole framework is bullshit. But because of her sexual proclivities, Lilith became an outcast dark goddess. So the dark goddess, and if you're just hopping on now, welcome. I'm glad you guys are here. I'm starting with dark goddess archetypes, so we all have a ground floor. The dark goddess can be like Kali. She can symbolize death, destruction, and rebirth. And that death might be the death. In terms of this dialogue, it's not always literal death. It's like the death of an ego, or the death of trauma, or the death of a way of being. So she's not necessarily physical death. So the dark goddess can be like death of identification. Like if you've ever identified as a victim, and yes, there are victims. I'm not going to get into that one on this live stream. Yes, there are victims. But if you've identified as a victim for a good reason, Kali can help you see the other parts of yourself that are more powerful. I'll phrase it that way for today. And in a similar way, or Kali can also help you, how do I want to say this? If you're living in a way that is not the way you want to be being, Kali can help you release that and find a new way of being, whether that's in your relationships or your finances or your life or anything. So that's the archetypal energy of Kali as the dark goddess. And Lilith as the dark goddess symbolizes those parts of ourselves that we reject or outcast. The sinner. I love that. I'm a sinner. Are you guys sinners? You know what I'm saying, right? The sinner. Not that there is sin, but you know what I'm saying. The sexual deviant, the one who goes against patriarchy, the one who goes against religion. Lilith symbolizes all of those aspects of the dark goddess. And there's many, many, many other aspects, and you guys can Google this, or I'll do more live streams, but I wanted to give you a foundation because we're talking about the dark goddess, the unseen, and tribal deconditioning. So we need to talk, for any of this to make sense, we need to talk about the dark goddess versus shadow. Because you know how, in the online space, everybody's like, you're in your shadow. Okay. So you guys know what the dark goddess is now, or you have a sense. She is also a magical, energetic. Yes, sin is defined in so many ways, though. Yes, well, I'm a sinner too. We'll have a sin party. Sin is defined in so many ways, but right now I'm alluding to the Judeo-Christian notion of sin, the patriarchal notion of sin, kinky sex is bad, desire is bad, the body is bad. That's the department of sin that I'm sort of lining up, with the dark goddess. Like, the pleasure of the flesh is bad. And well, yes, it is if it's extreme, but no, it isn't. In general, it's a tool. Yeah, we'll have a sin party. So you guys have an energetic sense of the dark goddess, yeah? And I can share personal examples if it helps. Shadow is, I'm going to make this simple. Shadow is a consequence of trauma. So shadow includes like the traumas themselves, like the horrific acts that other people do to us. And then shadow also includes like the emotions, the feelings, the belief systems, and the behavioral patterns that come from that trauma. So I'm going to say that again. Shadow includes the traumas that other people perpetuate on us. Shadow also includes the emotions, the feelings, the belief systems, and the actions that we adopt as a result of those traumas. So this is really important because shadow and the dark goddess are two very, 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 very separate things, very different things. The dark goddess is actually a tool to clear shadow and to remove shadow. Sorry guys, I'm getting like all these emails. The dark goddess is actually a potent, somatic, embodied force to help us clear shadow and clear programming and clear karma, if you believe in that, and clear conditioning. But what's happened is a whole bunch of institutions have sort of mashed like the dark feminine or the dark goddess and shadow together. One of those institutions would be the church. I grew up Jewish. Another institution that mashes them together would be the synagogue in most Judaism. And of course, patriarchy as a whole mashes them together. And of course, if you're like me and you grew up in a dysfunctional family system, some dysfunctional family systems mash together shadow and like the dark goddess or the darkness. And then what happens, hey Phyllis, then what happens is we wind up feeling crazy, right? Because we all, especially as women, but men have this too, we all have this super potent, super rich, super juicy, like dark feminine aspect that is like waiting to be unleashed. And I'll give examples. But then if you grow up in church or if you grow up in synagogue, I'm going to back up. We all have this super dark, super juicy, super rich, dark feminine, dark goddess aspect that's waiting to be unleashed, right? And then a lot of us, almost all of us, have shadow also. And the dark feminine is like, I don't like good and bad as terms, but she's good, okay? And I'm not going to call shadow bad, but shadow is trauma and shadow deserves to be healed. And what happens, I'm going to talk about my childhood so you guys can understand how this gets conflated, because really, for this particular live stream, I'm my own best example. I grew up being raised Jewish, right? And in that religion, there was God, a no goddess, no feminine. And in that religion, the Jews are God's chosen people and nobody else is chosen. Yet as a little girl, I knew that there was a goddess, a feminine, like a really powerful feminine figure that belonged with God. As a little girl, I knew that my body and sexuality were holy and not sinful. And as a little girl, I knew that Judaism was lying to me when it said the Jews are God's chosen people, because everybody's chosen, okay? So that's like the dark feminine aspect of my upbringing. I could see through the lies of like religion and see the vibe of the mother goddess in the synagogue with Yahweh, with Jehovah, with El, with Jesus, with whomever you want to call it, right? And I could also see the lies in the Bible. It was like, I mean, the Jewish Bible doesn't make sex a sin, but it does have that very patriarchal Adam and Eve gig going. And I could see that was shit too. Catherine saying, how old was I? I was 3. I was 3 fucking years old when I was seeing through this stuff. And I was listening and I was like, whoa, this religion has cut some shit out. And I didn't know what was cut out, but that's like, but I knew it was wrong. And that's the chunk that I'm going to call like the dark goddess in my own upbringing. Now, the shadow in my own upbringing wasn't that. It wasn't that I knew that there was a goddess. It wasn't that I realized at a young age that sexuality, as long as there's love and healthy agreements, was holy and sacred, whether it's like with myself or with a woman or with 3 other people. As long as there's like love in a container, it's sacred. And I realized all of this at a young age. So that's like the dark goddess energy, if you guys are picking this up. And there's a lot more that I'll get to about this. Stay on, because I'll get to the dark goddess later in my life. So that's the dark goddess. And then my childhood, the shadow, was the fact that I grew up in a patriarchal system that was very abusive. I'm not going to get into the details here, but there was a lot of sexual abuse across multiple generations, and then a lot of silencing of that abuse. Okay? So that was the shadow. And the shadow is a totally separate topic than the dark goddess. Okay, so we just spent like 20 minutes just laying that out, right? So we all have shadow, and we all have some connection to this dark feminine, sacred feminine, dark goddess energy. It's just really a question of, one, how connected are you to this dark goddess energy, or how disconnected? Because, like, you know, if you grew up, I don't know, abused or Roman Catholic or whatever, you're probably pretty disconnected. And honestly, there's so much I'm going to say about how this energy and this frequency can be medicine for your whole life. I've already experienced it, like with my health in particular. Like my body, my health was a fucking nightmare from the trauma, and the dark goddess stuff, like, boom, transformed it. So I'll get to that. So we have the dark goddess and we have the shadow and the difference. And let's talk about what tribal programming is, because what I want to say, that the point of this live stream is really going to be about how reconnecting to the dark goddess energy can clear your shadow and free you from tribal programming. Yeah, Catherine saying, yes, I believe it. It's a force. It's totally a force. So the heart of this is, one, hey, Robert. Hi, good to see men here. That's awesome. Bring in the men. Hey, Sophie. The heart of this live stream is, one, how can we collectively reconnect to this dark goddess energy? And then collectively and individually use this energy. Hey, gorgeous yourself, Sophie. And how can we collectively and individually harness this dark goddess energy to free ourselves from tribal conditioning and tribal programming? Because that's where this is headed, and that's where all of this work is going. When you harness the dark goddess energy and free yourself from the tribal deconditioning, it's like the shadow falls away. It's like the trauma falls away, the shitty belief systems fall away, the health problems fall away, the relationship problems fall away. You get it? So it's like this process of sacred undoing. And that starts with knowing the difference between the dark goddess and the shadow and reconnecting to the dark goddess. Okay, so we spoke about what shadow is, and we spoke about what the dark goddess is. And if you're just hopping on now, go back and watch from the beginning. Tribal programming. Let's define this. We all grow up with a set of belief systems that are not necessarily ours. Now, that can be something like from the school system, where it's like you have to raise your hand, and if you just speak up, you're bad. That's like a very mild example. It could be huge, like you have to work really hard for $10 an hour and suffer for your money. That's another example of tribal programming. A third example of tribal programming would be something like my past, where I grew up in an abusive family, and then here's a great one. Up until I was 30 years old, I thought I was a bad person. That's some heavy tribal programming. I was abused, so I must be bad. That's tribal programming. So this is all, and the tribal programming is actually what creates the shadow, and it gets weird like that. Like, we get programmed with shit that's not ours, that comes from, let's say, church and synagogue for sure. For many of us, our families of origin, school system, and then we take it on, and like we get these like whacked belief systems and like self-hatred and these symptoms. So the tribal programming is all the garbage that we've collectively been forced to take on that's not ours. And the symptoms emerge as shadow. The symptoms become like, I hate myself, or I can't make money, or they can even show up in our body. For me, I had insomnia for a decade. That was my tribal programming causing the shadow of 10 years of insomnia. You guys get this? So tribal programming leads to shadow. The dark goddess, dark feminine, is the medicine to undo this mess. And there's been a few comments, but if you have questions, pop them in, okay? There's so much more to say about like tribal programming. So tribal deconditioning, because right, we're talking about the dark feminine and the unseen. To undo tribal conditioning, tribal deconditioning is like this. It's like, imagine you have a given program. And I'm going to use myself as an example for this live stream because I have more potent dark goddess stories about myself than any of my clients. So it's just like the easiest place to be for this particular live. Tribal deconditioning is undoing the tribal programs and liberating yourself. And one of the tools is using the dark goddess to undo the tribal conditioning and to liberate yourself. And I am seriously, you guys, just going to share a personal story for this one. Back in, so from 2002 to 2011, I didn't sleep for a full night. So for 9 years, I was sleeping for half the night. Like maybe some nights it was 2 hours, some nights it was not at all. Maybe once a week I'd sleep for the full night. And can you guys imagine how you would feel if you only slept half a night for 10 years? You'd feel like shit. I felt like shit. I felt like ass. And I didn't know why. And it actually came from tribal programming. Or trauma. What had happened, I'll tell you what had caused it, but I was going to like yoga and meditation and breath work and therapy and trying to like get out of this, and nothing was quite working. I was like, why the fuck can't I sleep? I was like looking at my childhood and like looking at my diet and like taking vitamins, and like nothing was fixing this like freaking like 10-year problem. So what had happened was I was working with several therapists, but at the same time, I was in a goddess circle, literally a group that was working with the dark goddess. And we did different archetypes, but it was like the 3rd or 4th month, and we got up to the archetype of Kali. Now, I spoke about Kali, the goddess Kali, at the start of this live, but Kali, if you're just jumping on now, is death, destruction, and rebirth. And all of these goddesses have different mantras, and one of hers is Kaliye Swaha. So if you're on here live and you feel like jumping into this, you can even try saying it. Kaliye Swaha. Kaliye Swaha. Kaliye Swaha. So I was in this goddess circle, invoking this dark goddess of death and destruction and rebirth. And for me, my shadow would have been, in that case, the 10 years of not sleeping would have been the shadow, and the events that caused it would have been the tribal programming. And I'm stuck and I'm not sleeping, and I'm calling in this goddess of death. And yeah, 40-day mantra. Yes, Catherine's saying she knows of Kali through Kundalini yoga. Absolutely. She shows up there. She's wonderful. So, and I was doing Ashtanga yoga, and we don't really do gods and goddesses. I still do Ashtanga yoga. We don't really do them so much except in short little chants. Brahma maybe, but anyway, to back up. And I'm doing this like deep medicine work with Kali. And I'm in therapy with a mind-body therapist. And then I'm going to EMDR, which is a totally different kind of therapy, and all to figure out why I'm not sleeping. And all of a sudden, I'm at EMDR one day and I'm talking, and this like massive trauma story falls out of my mouth. And I'm like, oh my God, this massive trauma happened, and boom. And this massive trauma story just like, that was so scary and so dark, like falls out of my mouth. Right? Like, it's like waking up and realizing you had the world's shittiest childhood, like not knowing and then knowing, and boom, the story fell out of my mouth and I knew what had happened. And it was like, holy crap. But it took the work I was doing with Kali. It took me being on my yoga mat. It took me going to mind-body therapy. And it took me having two other therapists as well to get to that tribal conditioning. And I'm going to share this part because it matters. What had happened, I'm not going to share the specifics, but it was a series of traumas that had happened in the middle of the night. And that's why I couldn't sleep for 10 years, because I had had serious trauma happening in the middle of the night for like 5 or 6 years of my childhood. My body held on to the pattern. The tribal programming of like, it's not safe to sleep kept me up for like 10 years of my adult life in the middle of the night, which was like hell. And then I'm like invoking Kali and working with the dark goddess, as well as therapy, as well as yoga, as well as some other stuff. And boom, the story falls out of my mouth, right? And then the tribal deconditioning begins. Oh, Catherine, you're like, whoa, I thought you knew this story. Yeah, lady, I thought you knew this. So this is a huge reason of why I do trauma work if you're on this live, because of that leg of my journey. And we have to work with the dark goddess in this, because I went to therapy for like 10 years to try to fix this, and you guys don't have 10 years to work through your shit. I want you to work through it in like 6 months or something, okay? Because this could have happened much faster had I been using all of these tools on my path and not like spent a decade finding them all. So the tribal deconditioning in my story, not this one, what? Okay, so Catherine's saying not this one, and you feel free to share what that's in reference to, Catherine. So the tribal deconditioning, in this case, that was my sleep returning, began immediately the second I found Kali, the second I started to work with the dark goddess, with all the therapy and the other things that I was doing, the second the trauma fell out of me, then the deconditioning began. And what that looked like has not been clean. It's not been like 7 figures with an orgasm overnight. I wish I had that story, but that's not what happened. But what did happen, practically speaking, was that I began to sleep. And for someone who hadn't slept for a decade, that was pretty fucking magical. Yeah, oh, okay, you didn't know this particular story. Okay, got it. For some reason, I thought you knew this because I like shared this story a lot. So I am glad I'm doing a Facebook Live about it. So, and then I began to sleep. So the tribal deconditioning in this case was I'd had a major health crisis for a decade, and then I began to sleep. And that alone was like heaven on earth. But it took the mind-body work, it took the shamanic work, and I haven't even gone into how the dark goddess is highly somatic or embodied and highly shamanic or visionary. I haven't even gone there. But it took all of that for the tribal deconditioning to kick in. And in this case, I regained normal sleep. It was not immediate, but my sleep got better and better and better. And within about half a year of this experience, I was sleeping like a normal person. So that's like the potential of the dark goddess in this work. And I can say stuff about clients, and, you know, like I had a client who didn't have a menstrual cycle and for her adult life, and we did this work and she got her period back in 8 sessions. She was taking pills to have her period. Within 8 sessions, she had her menstrual cycle back. I had another client, and we did some of this work, but we used the dark goddess for sexuality more with her. And what happened from that piece of work was she left the wrong man and the wrong relationship for the right relationship. And she wanted to build a business, and that did not happen. But what happened in our work with the dark goddess is that she erased tens of thousands of dollars of debt. So this work has a lot of implications, whether it's, yeah, I'll get to that, Catherine. That's a good point. Whether it's my story with health or my client stories with relationships or regained menstrual cycles or like erasing debt. Catherine saying she is deeply connected to the subconscious, clearly hence the dark. Yes, she is connected to the subconscious. So on one level, the dark goddess has the archetypes, right? She has like Kali and Lilith, and my chosen name, Ashara, is actually an aspect of her, and that's going to be like a 2-hour live when I do it, so I'm not going there. But she also has like practical parallels, which Catherine is starting to point out, which is good because I wanted to get into this. She is deeply connected to the subconscious. The subconscious, the first thing I want to say about this is the fastest route to the subconscious is through our body. As in all of our memories, remembered or repressed, all of our emotions, all of our feelings, all of that stuff lives in our body. And when I was on this journey with the dark goddess, which is a journey that I'm still on just in different ways, it's not about thinking your way through. You're not trying to figure it out or thinking or like making yourself do like 3 hours of spiritual practices you hate like every day. It's not about that. It's not about thinking. It's not about talk therapy. It's not about journaling. It's not about making yourself do something for 3 hours every day because it's a spiritual practice. It's literally about feeling your way through. So the first and primary connection you need to embark on this journey fully is the connection to your body and how your emotions and feelings and memories live in your body. Because I have to tell you guys, on this whole path, it is a dance of feeling your way through, and she will come to you through emotion and sensation and your body. She also resides in the visionary and the shamanic. I don't know if you guys have ever been on a shamanic journey, but one of my first mentors was a shaman. And I'm not talking about ayahuasca. I'm talking about shamanic visionary journeying without drugs. You do not need drugs or substances. I do not do them. I do not teach that. I do not, if you do them, I don't have anything against people doing that. It's just not a part of what I teach. And the dark goddess also lives in the visionary or the shamanic. So for you to embark upon this journey and to receive her transformations, and the words, you know how Judaism and Catholicism have like original sin, and to be restored to your original goodness, which is really at the end of the day what this is about, to be restored to your original goodness. It's really going to be required that you cultivate your connection to your body, that you cultivate your connection to your emotions and feelings in your body, which are connecting you to the subconscious, because she lives in the subconscious. Yes, she is the subconscious. There's so much more there. And that you are willing to do visionary work and to learn how to shamanically journey to visionary and shamanic realms as well, which actually live within the body. The somatic connection and the shamanic connection actually intersect. So Catherine had typed, she is deeply connected to the subconscious, clearly hence the dark. You got it. The subconscious hence the dark. And that actually goes into a whole dialogue about the collective subconscious, which can have things like fear and guilt and shame, but can have like really positive things too, like art and vision and imagination and creativity. So yes. Okay. I have notes. I haven't looked at them, but now I'm going to look at them. Okay. Okay, so there's another thing I could say about the dark goddess, and this is a change of topic. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but there's a lot of, at least in 2015 when I started doing online coaching, there was a lot of stuff about like sexuality for manifestation and orgasm for manifestation. This is also her realm. Now, the like sex magic stuff isn't just the dark goddess. It's like there's occult schools that teach it that don't necessarily have anything to do with her. You can use light goddesses for this work. So the sex magic stuff is not just the dark goddess, but her realm and the sex magic realm overlap. What do I want to say about this? Do you guys have questions about this? Lilith is like a really good example of like the dark goddess and sexuality. And sexuality is a separate topic from sex magic. What I will say is the way that I have done sex magic with myself and the way I have taught it to my clients has required a deep connection to burning desire, like one thing that you really deeply desire, a deep connection to the body, and a deep connection to a specific deity, usually a feminine deity or goddess of choice. And the work has been about linking up all those energies. Now, I've done sex magic with goddesses that aren't dark goddesses. Like, well, some would say Isis is a dark goddess. She went to the dead and returned. That's pretty dark. I've done a lot of sex magic with Isis, who could arguably be a dark goddess, but also with like Aphrodite, who absolutely is not. So she has a place in that realm and that cosmology as well. And I'll probably just leave that piece there for you guys and maybe do a separate live stream on Tantra and sexuality and manifestation at some other time. Okay, we have comments. Catherine is saying, yes, your body is powerful. It holds powerful faculties. It goes back to how you started this live stream and how the body was shunned or shamed. Okay, I'm going to start this from the beginning. I'm going to reread Catherine's comment out loud for myself and for everyone. Yes, your body is powerful. It holds powerful faculties. It goes back to how you started this live stream and how the body was shunned or shamed. It also connects to how we were taught to value our thoughts and mindsets more than what our body signals to us. Yes. So to address the first part of what Catherine's saying about how the body was shunned or shamed, this, of course, ties deeply into the dark goddess. The dark goddess is the gateway to reclaiming our original innocence. I'm going to say that again. The dark goddess is the gateway to reclaiming our original innocence. The innocence of the body, the innocence of the flesh, the innocence of sexuality and desire. And for those of you guys who are trauma survivors, the innocence of it wasn't your fault. Because no matter what trauma you've been through, in that case, you are innocent. And our families, our churches, our synagogues, our educational system have, one, cut out and devalued the feminine. Two, cut out and devalued the body. Like there's so much going around that teaches to disconnect from the body. And three, cut out like especially the dark feminine, like Lilith getting cast out of the Bible. And this is like a multifaceted journey, because reclaiming the dark goddess is not just reclaiming her. It's reclaiming the body as holy. It's reclaiming sexual innocence. It's reclaiming your innocence in terms of any traumas you suffered, particularly as a child. Yes, and the creative. Yes, the creative has been cast out too, very much. The creative has been so devalued and cast out and shamed. And she with the body and with the visionary realms are the gateway to undoing the tribal conditioning and the tribal programming. And then as we do that, the shadow, like the maladaptive shit that we do, like self-hatred or procrastinating on paying the bills or putting ourselves down. As we reclaim her, as we reclaim our bodies, as we reclaim our sexuality, as we reclaim our sexual innocence, we have the tools to undo the tribal programming and the tribal conditioning. And then everything that we name as shadow organically falls away. So that actually doesn't necessarily feel like the end point of this live stream, but it feels like the end point of like the primary heart of this live stream. I want to see if there's